Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. How the tree of life helps leaders execute their vision. Today, I have a great guest for you. And you know I'm Dianne A. I'm that catalyst that meets you at the center of your creativity, your vision, and the execution of your dreams. I have a guest with us today who is an expert in bringing leaders into their vision in a very profound and not often thought about way. Sharon Rosen is somebody I've known for quite a while. I first met her online in different groups, and then I've met her in person, and I follow all of her work because there is a dynamic, amazing connection that really helps leaders, myself being a leader and other people I've sent to her, really excel. So I said, Sharon, you have to come on the show and talk to us about how the tree of life can really take you as a leader from wherever you are into something even more magical and magnificent. So welcome to the show, Sharon.
Thank you. What a great introduction. And I love that we're having this conversation, not just as like, I'm the person who knows this stuff and you are curious, but you now know a little bit more about Kabbalah and the Tree of Life than you did before.
Yes, I do. And the Tree of Life, I've heard about it for so long, like my whole life. I have a friend of mine who gave me a beautiful necklace of the Tree of Life that I wear often. And in another time in my life, I bought a piece of art that was jasper with copper on it. That was the Tree of Life. Or that's what they called it.
Yes.
And I'm like, this just keeps showing up in my world. And what I know is if something keeps showing up in your world, go investigate it. There's something going on.
Right.
So then I meet you and you know about it. And I'm like, oh, there's a person who knows. So explain to everybody, or can you give us like a little snapshot?
Yeah.
Because it's so big and complex. But what's a snapshot about the Tree of Life? Like, give us a little understanding, because not everybody will knows right away what it is.
Sure. And I just want to share an image just so people have a sense visually that this is you see a lot of images of trees and maybe they have fruit and birds and flowers in them.
Right.
This is the Tree of Life that is considered the blueprint for all of creation in Kabbalah or Kabbalah, you can say it either way, which comes from the Jewish mystical path. And we work with the qualities inherent in the tree, in those different, I guess I should keep that out, in these different circles or what are called sephirot are qualities of the divine, of what we're all made of, and qualities, of course, that are within each one of us. And as we learn to work with them and bring this dynamic into better balance within ourselves, you can actually imagine that you are made from this. You are made from the stuff that is part of all creation. And so if you can imagine that Tree of Life as an energetic that lives within you in working with these different aspects and qualities, balancing them out, understanding where maybe things from your past keep you stuck in the same ways. Unlike therapy, we work in both a personal and interpersonal and an energetic way. And it just shifts things so profoundly for people. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, it's amazing. So when did it start with you? How were you introduced to the Tree of Life? And tell us a little bit about that story of Sharon's journey to even get curious and know about it. How did that happen?
Well, I was raised Jewish, and being raised Jewish in conservative Judaism in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s, you never heard the word. Nobody talked about it. We
Really?
didn't know. No, it was not part of anything. A lot got lost after the Holocaust. All right. A lot of the rabbis, the sages, the Kabbalistic scholars and leaders were lost. And also there was this great move towards assimilation, right? They're killing us because we're Jewish. Okay, we'll still be Jewish, but we'll be more not so very
different.
Jewish and different.
Right.
Exactly. Right. So I was always on a spiritual search. It's who I am. It's what my life's been about. I always felt very connected to God, even when I was in synagogue and I was chanting and praying in Hebrew and I didn't really understand what I was saying, but the beauty and the power in the words and the melodies, I always felt very connected. And so I was on a spiritual search, as so many people are, as I became a teen and into my 20s, and I went to ashrams and I chanted in Sanskrit and I, explored Buddhism and different religions, but I always felt deeply Jewish. And then I started hearing about Kabbalah somewhere in the mid 90s. And what I was hearing was, it can be dangerous. It's very intense. You've got to really know what you're doing. You've got to have a good teacher. And I was trying to teach myself. I actually bought these Kabbalah cards thinking, oh, this is how I'll learn about Kabbalah and the tree. And as I said to you, it's really hard to learn from, like, people often ask me, is there like a book I should get? There's not a book that's really clear and simple and comprehensive. So I was not finding my way in very easily. And then I was at Omega Institute for a different workshop. And Omega is a wonderful holistic learning and retreat center here in New York State. And the person who became my teacher, Jason Schulman, was there. And I was able to go to an open session of his. And I was just like, this guy is great. I think I can really learn from him. And I'm very discerning. Like, I know you are. I'm very discerning about who I'm going to follow and learn from. But I really felt like I can study with this man. And so I did what was then a 3-year and then became a 4-year training in something that's now called non-dual Kabbalistic healing. So the very, root understanding and awareness is that we really live in a non-dual universe, but being humans, we split things. It's good, it's bad, I like it, I don't like it. And so how do we come from this more non-dual perspective?
And I think that's one of the things that draws me to it, because I'm a metaphysician and I consider myself a Neoplatonic non-dualist, where Plato talked about the forms and is a non-dualist. And so when there's all this good, bad, right, wrong, but conversation all the time, yes, it has its place, but my overarching way of living is not in that war zone, I call it.
Yeah.
And so when you started first telling me about it, I'm like, now I know I've been curious, because there's this part of me that wanted to learn about something I knew nothing about. Right. I think all leaders, every leader, all of those you out there listen to us, if you're a leader, you got to really start growing, and expand yourself into something you know nothing about and be curious. And it's interesting that it was a multiple year course to learn.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like a weekend seminar. It wasn't a little online thing. And then now you have this little certificate. It's a thing.
Oh, this was, it was big. It was, we stepped into a very big and deep container. And what was so wonderful for me was that by doing this training, and what we learned is it really brought the tree of life alive in me. I really have a relationship with the tree, with the universes. So the tree is contained within universes, which is part of why it gets complicated trying to learn about it. But, going from the most inclusive and ethereal and, untouchable to this manifest reality. And, I get it in a way that I never could have gotten from books. And I also learned a very beautiful form of working with people for psychospiritual healing and balance. And so doing the healings with people, engaging with them that way is, it's a great gift.
So now you just sparked 2 questions.
Okay.
if you look at the Sharon who started the program, started the class after you met him at Omega, and you look at the Sharon who emerged, what are a couple of the profound things you look back and go, whoa, I have really changed, or I've come alive in a different way? Give everybody a little bit of how you personally grew or shifted or changed, whatever, transformed during the training part.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't want to, scare anybody, but I used to say to my friends, it's kind of like I was, this beautiful hunk of beef and I was put through a meat grinder. And on the other end, I'm not sure, am I going to be a hamburger patty? Am I going to be a meatloaf? Am I going to be meatballs? It's like, it was, we looked at so much and so deeply, and we had to look at our own wounds. People I think who are healers and leaders and guides, if you're not working your own, like you said at the beginning, if you're not working your own stuff, there's only so effective that you can be. Because there's always things in life that are going to trigger us. So how do you respond to that? So it helped me understand my own personal hurts and psychological triggers and wounds and things, the stuff from my childhood that I still maybe held against my parents or didn't really understand. It helped me be able to have a different relationship with the not as close as I would like relationship that I have with my brother, which was always kind of a pain point for me. So it helped me look at that whole family dynamic, but also how I showed up with my clients. Even when I was doing massage, which I was a massage therapist primarily for 25 years, and I was doing that work while and after I went through this program. It's not like I came out and it was like, okay, everybody, I'm a Kabbalistic healer. I know you're going to want that. It's going to be much better for you than a massage. People still wanted that hands-on work. And I was able to bring this sensibility, this knowledge, this ability to hold space in a different way for people so that they can be received and reflected in a way that was more healing for them. I didn't get triggered in the same way, or if I did, I knew how to deal with it. And my response time was a little quicker. Get caught in the quagmire for quite so long. I mean, we're always going to there's always stuff,
Right.
Very few, as a friend of mine once said, I think there's a lot of really wise people out there, but I'm not sure that many of them are actually fully enlightened to where they wouldn't lose their temper in a traffic jam or, get triggered. But,
right.
The famous Buddhist phrase is, if you think you're enlightened, go home and visit your family.
Right. Exactly.
And you can respond. You can, as you're more healed, you naturally respond.
Yes. So I just think it's amazing. So there's this huge transformation. I've gone through transformations in my life where I'm like, I don't think anything about me is the same except maybe my fingerprints, and I'm not even sure they're the same, Right. And when you're talking about the meat grinder thing, I was thinking the same thing. Like, I know that I am not that other same person. Maybe my fingerprints are the same, but that's probably it, and so when you're talking about that, I'm like, yeah, I've gone through that before, more than once.
Yeah, it's not always fun and pretty, but it's so worthwhile.
Yes.
It's like, you can't run a marathon unless you, create more endurance. And so, you have to be able to sustain yourself. And it's not, it's not always just light and easy and pretty on the spiritual growth journey. It rarely is, actually.
I think spiritual growth journeys are very messy, and people like to say that it's all beautiful and it's great and
love and light
and that's true.
Right.
But and at the very same time, it can be very messy and very intense and very challenging and requires multiple peer groups of support and other human connection and direction, no matter who you are. Right. I think the greatest leaders, the greatest visionaries have other people in their corner who are leaders and visionaries, because we got to support each other. So,
right. And on that non-dual thing, right, we talked about that a lot. I talk about that a lot in this intro Kabbalah class that I teach, is we have to learn how to hold opposites and hold paradox. That's where the healing and the wholeness come in, not from thinking that you can push away all the quote unquote negative stuff or the stuff you don't like and just go to the light. It's like, life is messy and it's beautiful and it's challenging and it's amazing. And when you learn to hold both of those things in good balance, which isn't always 50-50, depending on what's going on, then amazing things can come from that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so, so true. So healing and rectifying. You use the word to rectify a situation when we were talking and before. And then, of course, when I was doing one of my lives, I used the word rectify instead of the word heal. And people resonated that rectifying gave them more hope, where healing seems to be a heavy word for them. I don't know that it is for everybody, but for that particular person.
Right.
And so I really love the word rectify. Would you speak a little bit to that? Like, so a lot of people on our healing journey, but also a lot of people are repelled. Like, I don't need to be healed, or I don't want to be healed, or whatever. And what do you mean rectify? Like, can you elaborate on how that meaning is important?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I love about this framework, this Kabbalistic healing framework, is it starts from the stand that you're not broken and I'm not here to fix you.
Ooh, you're not broken and I'm not here to fix you.
Right. I am here as a quote unquote healer. It took me a long time to own that word. And I think of that as, and we were talking about this before off camera, being a catalyst, right?
Yes.
So that's, to me, what I do is I'm a catalyst for other people's always available emerging wholeness. So you already have everything you need inside of you, but life, by the very virtue of being born into human form, there's going to be things that get a little out of kilter, and we learn to adapt, right? It's like if somebody has a physical handicap, we look and we go, oh my God, how do you live without a leg? And they're like, oh, well, now I have they learn, they deal, they get a prosthetic, they keep moving on. Everything isn't about that thing. So rectifying is a way of holding, reflecting, embodying, and resonating out the already healed and whole being that lives within whoever I'm working with, where things have gotten, off kilter, and it happens. And we do need other people to help us. You can do a lot on your own, but one of the first things I heard from my teacher is all healing happens in relationship. Because we get wounded in relationship. So we have to heal in relationship. So that rectification process, I like to say, you're all already whole and good as you are, but you can always embody that deeper, wider, like it doesn't end until the day you take your last breath. If you're on a path of growth and healing or rectification, or just ever greater measures of wholeness emerging.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think it gives us like freedom to kind of like expand and say, everything doesn't always have to be this heavy, oh my God, I'm broken. This is a terrible thing. I need to heal, and it also helps mitigate spiritual bypass.
Yes.
Where, okay, everything's all perfect, with the total denial of the fact that we are in human form. And I don't care how spiritual we all are, as long as we're in human form, then there's stuff we're working on or doing.
Yep.
And that's the whole point of Someone Gets Me, because a lot of times we're misunderstood or not understood, which is different.
Right.
And so how has that affected you? People just not getting it or not understanding you. How has that affected you in your life?
Affected me, or not getting me, or not getting the work, the Kabbalah?
Not getting you. Not
getting me. Well, I think over time I've just learned to not I don't engage in that. Like, that's part of my own healing. That's part of my rectification, is everybody doesn't have to get me.
Okay. So how did you get to that point? Because a lot of people start out with nobody understands me.
Yeah.
When you're a spiritual seeker, people look around and they go, when you're younger, especially, like, what?
Right.
So
right.
Share with people some tips of how you got to the place where it no longer holds power, that if somebody doesn't get you, you still love them and keep on going. How did you get there? Because there's a lot of people stuck in the nobody gets me.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I remember years ago being in a personal growth workshop, and I was talking to my brother, and I said something about validating my feelings. He said, I don't need to validate you. You're not a parking meter. You're not a parking I'm like, oh my goodness. So I know. I'm like, thank you. Thanks very much. I love you too. Well, that's an interesting question, because it's been such a process. It's hard for me to pin it down. I mean, I've done a lot of healing work, done a lot of therapy work. I've done a lot of, a big part of my practice also is mindfulness. Mm-hmm. So I've done a lot of work with particularly loving kindness practice, compassion practice. And I guess as I embody more of my own innate wholeness and goodness, I don't go to my brother for certain things.
Right. Yeah.
I don't go to him. He's who he is. And this was one of the big emotional journeys of my life, because it's just the two of us. And I like to think that as the only two siblings in the family, we would be close. But that's not what's on offer. And that's not who he is. And we love each other. And if I needed him, he'd be right in the car, coming to help me. And it's not a, hey, sis, I love you. How you doing? And so for me to sit with myself, be compassionate for the fact that I want something that's not on offer, learn how to soothe myself, right? Like, I love to quote, there's a wonderful Buddhist teacher named Sylvia Boorstein, and she actually does this thing where she puts her hand on her heart, and when she notices that she's heard about something, and she's like, oh, sweetie, it's okay, that's hard. Like, you want that person to get you, and they don't. But to always come back into yourself, to not be expecting, and it's natural to want that, but I find that the less I want and expect that, I actually have better relationships, and it isn't about them totally getting who I am or what I do.
Yes.
But because I use this phrase a lot, taking your seat. It comes from Buddhism, but also from this Kabbalistic work. It's like, the more I just really take my seat and sit in my knowing, my goodness, my wisdom, my learning, my healing, then I don't need as much for people out there to get me in a way I used to want that.
And then therefore, people get you more.
Exactly.
That's the paradox, right?
Isn't it? Yeah.
When we release the need to be gotten,
right,
because we've done our work and we're healing and we're sitting, I call it our spiritual authority.
Yes.
Then people get us more.
That's right. Because we're sovereign. I like the word sovereign also, which is spiritual authority.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you notice that everybody, that Sharon is using Buddhism and Judaism together in this mystical conversation. And I think that's the beauty of all of the mystics, wherever they're coming from over the ages, bring with them beauty that can't be killed. They tried to kill it off and it didn't work. And even in that, okay, we'll all assimilate to try to survive, basically, it still didn't kill it off.
Right.
And the overarching, part of the world that wants to be very controlling, like the patriarchal, like to stuff everybody into this box, that didn't kill it off. You can't kill off the mystical thread that weaves through life.
Because it's the truth, capital T truth.
Exactly.
I love that, beauty that can't be killed.
Wow. Yes, it can't be killed. Try. It's been tried and it hasn't worked.
Right.
And even in the old Catholic traditions, the mysticism of Mary and all that survived with the women hiding from all the persecutors. Yeah. And so it's in every tradition. It's in Buddhism. It's in all traditions. The mystics could either go underground or do whatever they needed to do, but you can't kill it because it's capital T truth. Yeah. The human cannot kill off the divine. It just isn't going to work.
Right.
So there's power in this for leaders. Mm-hmm. Now, a leader is not necessarily a position. In my world, a leader can be a 4-year-old who leads somebody out of danger or sometimes the leaders are the mischievous ones who get the class to do wild stuff to the teachers, but they're still leaders. And we're all leaders in some way. And what I would love to talk about a little bit now is, I'm all about executing your vision and using your creativity to do it. And when I first took your class about the intro to the Kabbalah, because I had to learn about it, I was curious. And one of my core values is curiosity and check everything out. So of course I want to take the class. So take the class, and you are an amazing teacher, and I'm listening to you and I'm going, wow, I resonate with this. Wow, I didn't know that. And I had a lot of ahas and oh wows and what? And you're like all these different things. But the more I listened, the more I said, wow, I wonder how that can fit into my role as a leader and leaders in general. Because I really believe that if leaders are more deeply supported internally and externally, then we're able to lead more effectively with less angst and anger and attack in the world.
Right.
We can lead from a more authentic spot. So how, I know this is a big question, so you can just pick any part of the answer because it's much bigger that this question could probably be the whole podcast. How could we use the tree or the ideas of it to begin to support leaders? Like there's leaders listening to us right now and they're going, well, okay, how do I do it? What do I do? What's an action I can take? Because we're all about give me something to go do.
Right.
Okay. And since you only offer your classes every once in a while, and if everybody called you all at the same time, there'd not be enough room. So can we give them something they can do before they actually call you and engage in something more powerful to get started, to make friends with the idea that if they live from this essence, their leadership transmutes into something even more amazing than they thought?
That is a big question. And I've got a couple of different places that I can go, but I'm going to try and keep it simple. Because as I said at the beginning of the class on Kabbalah, my main goal as a teacher is to leave you less confused than more confused. So when we're working with the tree, and if you imagine that this is above the head, this is on either side of the head, and then we've got the shoulders, and then we've got the hips and the legs. I'm going to talk about these two aspects, which correlate to the hips and the legs, which has to do with how you move in the world. So if someone is in a leadership role, they're used to going, doing, and maybe not so much stepping back into their own splendor, their own wisdom, their own goodness, taking time for themselves. Maybe they're really good at going out and doing a lot, and maybe not so much that sort of self-reflexive, I almost want to say self-care, but it isn't even that. It has to do with when you've got a good balance in these two areas, especially if you're somebody with low back pain, because you're always pushing. That pushing really has to be balanced with more internal aspect of self-care, of maybe a meditative practice or a writing practice or something that's really just for you, that really feeds you and sustains you, nourishes you on a really deep level, so that you can then go out. So it's a kind of you're not just push. maybe you're always on the bottom of the list, you're always in the back seat, really allowing that sometimes you have to stand still and go more internal, and then you refuel, and then you can move forward, and from a more strategic and balanced and sustainable place. Because I think a lot of people also deal with burnout. I would imagine that might be an issue for some of your listeners.
Well, I think a lot of people struggle with burnout because they're always pushing. And even leaders who aren't pushing can struggle from burnout, because if you don't take care of yourself along the way, you spend all your inner resources.
Right.
So the Tree of Life helps you keeping the flow going.
Yes.
So that we can be grounded and centered in what we're doing. And
right.
if we start moving too far too fast,
mm-hmm.
if we check back in, it helps us come back to who we are, so that we can actually move forward more effectively.
Exactly.
And I had that conversation with a client last night who called me quite late at night, really struggling with that push-pull of wanting to get a lot of things done very quickly. Mm-hmm. He's profoundly gifted,
right.
and sees things in a much more precise way than most humans, probably other than other profoundly gifted people like him. And we were talking about that, it's okay to stop for a minute, take a few deep breaths, go within and say, okay, is my gut and my heart and my head aligned? Like, where's my alignment? And then what are we doing? And then deciding to take action. That even if it feels like an emergency or urgent, it doesn't mean it is.
Right.
And so I think using the balance of the tree and being able to hold both things gives us permission to not have to be a slave to that urgency.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
It's huge. It's so huge. It's huge in our society. It's huge in people who have big visions. I gotta do it. I gotta get it out there. I gotta move this forward. Or people who are leaders, and maybe other people really lean into them and count on them. Maybe they don't feel that they have enough of that kind of support in their own life.
Right.
And then it's like you're trying to do a marathon on one leg, like literally one leg, without even a prosthetic to, balance you.
You're going to hop the whole way.
Let alone another actual whole solid leg. Yeah. And it is really from there that things can manifest. And also, whether or not people have a particular spiritual bent, I think to remember that, also to rest into the fact that you're part of something larger than just you and your work and your vision and your things that you're doing and the people that count on you, and to literally let yourself rest. And I'm very somatic, because I'm very physical, that thing. So literally feel yourself, maybe just stop and close your eyes for a minute when you have time during the day and go, oh, it's not just all about me. I'm not the only driver here, and just kind of rest back into the fact that you really are part of a much larger field of energy, creativity, pulsation of creative force.
Right. Yes. I think that's so very true. I just did an interview with a wonderful woman from Canada. We're talking about the immune system in cells. Yeah. And she was saying how people draw the cells like there's a wall around, and there is a cell wall, but it's so permeable that everything's flowing in and out. And that really our immune system and our gut and all of our being is energetically connected to everything that is, which is, of course, what I say all the time, because it is true. Everything affects everything. We're all connected. And many masters over the years have said that didn't start here, right. And what you're saying is the same thing. We're all connected. And so when we start pushing and feeling that urgency and getting out of alignment, we are resisting the greater forces of the universe. And in my experience, the universe wins. So it would behoove us to use that angst and frustration and upset as a sign to step back for a minute. It could be one breath, it could be 3 days, it could be whatever, but to step back for a minute and then as a leader say, okay, Now what, after I get aligned, now what do I do? And I think that's where the tree of life and doing some of the Kabbalah healing that you do is a great benefit because it's precognitive. So your ego, that's not your amigo, cannot get in the way. And leaders tend to overthink things and tend to wrap it on their head and therefore undo the very blessing they could be receiving.
Very well said.
Because overthinking is not thinking at all. It's an addictive process. It's not noble. Right. And we live in a society that it's been reinforced so highly that people are caught in this trance. Maybe they haven't even seen that yet. Right. So the work you do helps people get on the other side of the trance and the lies and be able to be alive and see what their life can be. And then it's easier then to break up that trance when I can have an experience that frees me from it. That the ego, who's not your amigo, cannot stop. That's what I think. I know, right? So I love talking about these things, and I love being able for people who are leaders in any way or visionaries in any way or creatives in any way to be able to really start seeing that life is multidimensional and that like I have multidimensional ability just like you do, right? I could cut with fluid viewing, I call it. We could go at anything from lots of angles. So what are some things that you do or you could share with us that help with the bringing them together? The multidimensional, there's all these really neat things and there's trees within trees and all these things I've learned in the class. Okay. And if you're curious about what we're talking about, when I put Sharon's website in the show notes, if I were you, I'd be clicking on it and take her next class and then she'll explain it to you. But I'm just going to keep on going. So how do we take all this multidimensional universes and all of this, and then we're meant as humans at the culmination of the ages, that's where we are as humans, to bring it into some sort of form. Ideally, I would imagine for the benefit of ourselves and others. So what are some things that you do personally and or that you might teach people to be able to kind of navigate this in a way that it serves them?
Wow. Well, I'm a big believer in practices. Right? So I have a morning meditation practice. And I go in and out, and right now I'm back in because I'm also doing more studies in, believe it or not, Jewish mindfulness. And so I've added some prayers, so prayer practice. And I love things that have to do with movement, chanting. So things that get you out of your head. You know, Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt therapy, said, you have to get out of your head and into your body. And I find it really interesting. Like it's kind of built into Judaism that there's this way that when if you see like really Orthodox Jews praying, they move, right? We kind of, there's this, call it chuckling. There's movements, and there are specific movements when you're standing and saying some of the prayers. You take a step forward, you take a step back. So there's something for me about really embodying things and getting out of my head into my body. Chanting does that for me, especially if I'm chanting in Hebrew, because I might know what the words mean, but I'm not cognitively attaching to them. Like if I'm listening to a love song and I'm, attaching to the meaning of it. Right. So and also Hebrew is a vibrational language. So there's that. So for me, a lot of it is practices that get me out of my head and into my body. And even mindfulness, it's very much about, okay, really feel your seat, really feel your sit bones. I've been doing this thing lately when I meditate of kind of meditating from my skeleton, like really feeling and tuning into like how my skeletal body is being held. So, I mean, that's not necessarily Kabbalistic, but since it's non-dual, everything is in there. You know, everything can be part of the practice and the healing. Did I get too far afield there? Or
No,
did
you did it all. And I'm about to put you on the spot in a really interesting way, but you didn't go too far at all. And I love again that you brought up Fritz Perls. And so everything's connected to everything and everything's in there. So we can talk about Buddhism or Judaism or mystics and psychology, and it's all in the soup.
Right.
And it all has its place and it all adds flavor and it all has value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I hear you saying.
Yes.
And to honor that value and pay attention to when you're meditating, where is your body? Whenever I start meditating, if my mind's trying to wander, I always pay attention to my little toes. So where are my little toes? And then once I can dial into my little toes, and I'm going to have to go all the way down my body to get there from my mind. And then it gives me my mind something to be entertained with so I can get back in my body. Right. And so when you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, I do that. So would you mind doing a chant?
No, I would be happy to.
I just think it would be really amazing because you've taught us some in the class and then you had the chanting that you offered on Zoom for a time. And you know, when you first said about chanting in the very beginning, when I very first started talking to you about all this, I knew about Sanskrit chanting and I knew about Hebrew prayers and movement because of being in the temple, but I didn't get the chanting part. Like I never really put all that together. And I think it would be really beautiful if you would share a chant with us.
Okay, let me see let me land on something. There's so many. That's why I'm having a hard time landing on one. So I'll do one that I did in the class, which is the meaning of it. It's Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi, and the meaning of it is God or divine or universe, whatever word works for you. The soul you have placed within me is pure.
Beautiful. The soul you've placed within me is pure.
Right? We don't have to, you know, really, it's just like it's like the Buddhists say, the waters get muddied and you have to sit so things can get clear and still. So that goes like this. Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi. Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi. Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi. Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi.
Oh, that was delicious. Oh, that was delicious. I have goosebumps.
Thank you. I love how when I do that, it changes the space.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It just changes the space. And what I love about chanting is it's not about, like, I'm not a singer, but chanting comes from in here, it comes from your heart, and it comes from your belly and from your soul. And it's a beautiful way, you know, the ancient rabbis and Kabbalists have a practice of singing what are called nigun. And nigun are wordless melodies. And they would do that as a way to get closer to God or to clear the path so that they can remember what's right in front of them.
Right. We're clearing the path so we can remember what is right in front of us and within us, right? And so I think as leaders, and visionaries, or as all people, that's essential in this dance. I mean, the world's going through all these changes and all kinds of things and all this uncertainty, and developing the skill to come home within. However we do that is essential. It's essential. Totally essential.
And the more I do that, the better I feel, the better my life is.
Right.
And it's very easy for me to go, oh, I know this stuff. Oh, I know this stuff. But I have to do it.
Mm-hmm. You have to do it, and you have to embody it and live it instead of just knowing it. And a lot of us are guilty for knowing stuff and not doing it, or knowing something and giving ourselves credit for having done it when we didn't do it. We just know it.
Yes. Yes.
It's true. I mean, that's what smart people do.
I used to do that a lot. I used to read a lot of books on meditation and think it was the same as meditating.
Right? I'll get this. If I read the book, or I listen to the Facebook Live, or I do whatever, or I listen to a podcast, then now I have the benefit. Well, it's the practicing of the whatever it is I'm learning that gives me the benefit.
That's right.
It's not the learning it, you know. Yeah. People say knowledge is power. And I say, well, I believe that the execution of the knowledge, that's power.
Yeah.
How are you going to execute what it is you say you know? Really? Now we're talking. That's my statement. Yeah. Some people go, oh, Dianne, knowledge is power. I'm like, not in Dianne's world. In Dianne's world, it's your execution of your knowledge. Now we're talking. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's important for all of us to learn multidimensional ways to kind of like bring ourselves into a state and a way of being that it lets us kind of emerge even more empowered, more transformed, more light, whatever word we want to use. The words are pedestrian. I don't know if they make sense.
No, if only we could do all this without words, it would be great.
Yes, because words are weird sometimes. They're not quite enough. So you have a vision for your life and what's important to you. Are you willing to share some of that? Like, you're a leader and you have a vision and you're very creative. And that's the common denominator of all of us on the show, listeners and guests. So if we fast forward a year from now or so and Sharon's vision is even more alive, what's it look like?
I think it looks like me continuing to really stay the course with my own practices so that I can be more clear and connected, and also speak more clearly so that people who I can help understand that I can help them, and then keep sending those ripples out, because there's a concept in Judaism, tikkun olam, the repair of the world. Mm-hmm. The world is essentially broken and we can fix it, but it doesn't have to be on a big level. So I want to touch as many people as possible, because the more healed we are, the more possible the healing of the world is. Mm-hmm. Healed people will heal the world. And again, it doesn't mean you're broken and you need to be fixed. But you know, right? We know when we're coming from the most connected, centered, aligned, true part of ourselves. So how can we do more of that so that we're not creating more discord, more, misunderstanding, more hiding, like, let's be as full selves as possible.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And just keep emanating that out and spreading it. So the more people that I can help and support in being that full aspect of themselves, that rectified, the more and more rectified version of themselves, then I feel like that's my way of adding to the healing of the world.
Oh, wonderful. That's really beautiful. And in my interview with Paul Zellers quite some time ago, he talked about the same idea. And I love the idea of the rippling out and as everybody does it together. And that's how I see it. I tell everybody it's a numbers game, and it's a numbers game like raise our vibration, which is being more rectified. And it's a numbers game of actually then sharing it so that others are touched by it.
That's right.
Because you could just sit in your house and raise your vibration. So you're raising the numbers.
Right.
And there's much more to it than that. It's that connection. We heal in relationships, like you said. It's so important. So do you work with people like remotely? Do we have to be in New York State to work with you? Or if somebody's listening to you and they're in London, or they're in Australia, or they're in Canada, or down here in Florida, will you work with them?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of what we have now with the technology. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, I'm not even really seeing in-person people very much here, but I can work with people anywhere because the healings are resonant, that ripples, and there really is no separation. So I can work effectively with people wherever they are.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so Sharon's contact information and her website are in the show notes along with her bio, so that you can contact her and follow her on social media and do like me. I'm on her email list because she writes the best emails, and I make sure that I keep feeding myself the amazing things coming through her. And I've experienced a few of her healings I don't know what we call them, but I can tell you this. I can tell you that I've done a lot of things in my 40-year, 50-year journey now, 40-year journey of self-development and healing. And I've tried many, many, many things, and all of them profound in their own way. And right on time, something that I didn't even know what it was, that I was curious enough to check out, has been transformative. And then I just said, well, I'm going to follow this path some more. So I think curiosity and checking out something we know nothing about in a way that is meant for our good and our benefit is required for our success. And I want to encourage any of you, if you like what Sharon is talking about, or you have a little curiosity, that you reach out to her or find a way to open the door of curiosity, because that's where our salvation is allowing new into a system so that it can put it together. So a couple last questions before we're done. I know I'm very conscious of your time. You're so generous to give me so much time today.
Hanging out with you.
What is the most memorable food you've ever eaten?
Wow. Talk about a left turn. Wow, okay, well, because it's been top of mind, a friend of mine lives on the big island of Hawaii, and when I was there, I had this coconut pudding with a passion fruit sauce. And if anybody knows anything about passion fruit, they're like these little tiny fruits, and you have to work really hard to get the tiniest, it's precious. It's like gold. And it had this passion fruit sauce, and I'm a chocolate person, and this was put me over the edge. Coconut pudding with passion fruit sauce. I can't even explain. It was the most ethereal, all my taste buds were firing. Amazing.
Oh, it was great. Look on your face. We're there with you, Sharon.
I'll go to Kona and get some.
Okay, I'll meet you in Hawaii. That's hilarious. So, is there anything that I didn't ask you about, or anything that you feel led that you would like to say or share before we end?
I don't know that I have anything I want to say or share. I do have another class starting at the beginning of September. Find Balance Through Kabbalah. So if people are interested, you can look for that. I just really encourage people to take time to do the quiet things that really nourish you and nurture you. And there's always time. You could take 1 minute, set a timer on your phone, take 1 minute, check in with yourself, especially if you've been pushing.
Right.
And just really be present with yourself in the moment.
Yeah.
And trust that like little things really add up and they really mean a lot. Like pennies in the bank doesn't seem like much. Put enough pennies in the bank, you've got $100. So don't think it has to all happen at once or be a big thing, but give yourself that gift of, again, I was talking about that balance of Netzach and Hud, of the two aspects of the tree, right? The legs, how we walk in the world, and then how we step into that private place where we really allow ourselves to receive and experience our own splendor and our own goodness.
Right. Yes. And sometimes when we're in our head, we can be so distracted from our own goodness and our own splendor because we're too busy doing, because we live in a culture that's all about doing.
Right. And also because, the neuroscience tells us, and this is what I love from the Buddhist stuff, the neuroscience tells us that we're wired for negativity. It's how our brains are built. And that the negative stuff is like Velcro and it'll hang on by one little loop. And the positive stuff is like Teflon. But you can neuroplasticity, you can regroove your brain. I love how all these things, we could talk for hours. I love how all these things work together. Yes. Kabbalah, Buddhism, neuroscience, these ancient wisdom teachings are now being
proven,
shown to be like these guys knew what they were doing because they were tuned in.
Right. Science is just now catching up and they're not even completely there yet, but they're getting there. They're centuries later.
Yeah, exactly.
Like sometimes I'll hear a report, science says blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
right.
I've been living and teaching that like for a really long time. Thanks for catching up with us, and people laugh at me. But when you dance in that place of visionary and creative and what action are you taking to execute it, like I do all day, all the time, sometimes people look at me like, wow, that's weird. But I don't think it's weird at all. That's how us leaders handle it. So all of you leaders that are listening to us, this conversation is meant for you because living in your head alone is like you being a stick with a brain. That doesn't work. It destroys your body. It stops your goodness from showing up in the world. And your goodness is important and vital. So please be a little curious about something new. Go to a place where you can go within. Get to a place where someone hears you. The name of the show, Someone Gets Me, comes from every time a client works with me for the first time, they typically end the conversation with, wow, someone gets me, because of my ability to listen deeply to that creative vision and help you execute it. So somebody like Sharon, who's an expert in helping unlock those things in you without your brain getting in the way, can serve you much more greatly than you imagine. And you don't have to be Jewish. Most of the people in the Kabbalah class I took from her weren't. It's a mystical, so it's for all of us. Everyone can benefit. And as Sharon said, when you benefit and raise your level of awareness, everyone around you is also affected. And together, our rectified, aligned selves are a mighty force. Mm-hmm. So I suggest you check out what Sharon has to do or say, follow her, get on her email list, take her class, do something, take an action. And of course, if you need help with your vision or your creativity or any of those things, contact me, because I'm happy to be here for you. That's why the podcast exists. And that's why Sharon came on the show. And that's why I do what I do, because it matters in the big picture. You matter in the big picture. So one last question, Sharon.
Yes.
So we're going to erect a billboard that the whole world can see that's going to have your message on it. What's your message?
Well, my message of the moment is take your seat in the center of your life.
Take your seat in the center of your life. Sharon Rosen, you heard it here on Someone Gets Me. That's perfect. I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with me today and being willing to flow with my intuitive questions that not even I know what was coming next, and for chanting with us and just bringing such richness to all of our lives today. Thank you so much.
Sweetheart, for having me.
All right. Remember, everybody, to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star and you're here on purpose, with a purpose. So let's use our curiosity and our multidimensional selves to emerge even more magical and brilliant. Until the next episode, if Someone Gets Me, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episodes, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.